your counselor role, even though the counselors are the directors. This meeting is being held via webinar with audio and video recording. To participate in this meeting, you must have registered with the city prior to the meeting. Counselors are the directors, but our title is director in this meeting. Presenters and members of the public, please mute your microphone and shut off your cameras at this time. When called on to speak or provide a presentation, you may unmute yourself and turn your camera on. During the public presentations and public comment portions of the meeting, you may raise your virtual hand to be recognized if not signed up to speak. If this meeting is disrupted, we will recess for 5 minutes and return. If that does not correct the issue, the meeting will end and be rescheduled. Roll call, Sammy.
We have Ray Smith, John Lehman, Nancy Bell, Patty McConnell, Marcus Alexander, and Kyle Blaine. John Fox, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Sammy. Do we have any citizen testimony at this time?
We do not.
Thank you. Business items, we have the minutes for the February 9th, 2021 Urban Renewal Agency. Is there any changes or edits that anybody wants to make at this time? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move.
Councilor
Go, John.
Bell.
Okay, I move to approve the February 9th Coburg Urban Renewal Agency minutes as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor Fox to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand in front of the camera so we can see it.
Mayor, will you please raise your hand so the minutes recorder can catch your vote? Thank you.
You got all of us? Okay. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Thank you. It passes unanimously. We have a financial update from Tim Gaines on the URA. Tim?
Good evening, everybody. What I have for you for the first item is our financial update is through August 30th of this year, 2021. As you all know, the URA, its main, what it does mainly is it helps finance the sewer debt. We also have other costs that include audit, legal fees, and some filing fees. Those are usually under $10,000. We probably will see some more tax dollars come in by the end of June. And I guess I would entertain any questions. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions, comments, or statements? Thank you, Tim. That was quick and easy. It is the URA, though.
Yeah, not much to it.
Okay, public hearing. I will now open the public hearing. It is 6:50. It's a public hearing regarding resolution 2021-01-U, a resolution adopting the agency budget for fiscal year 2021-22 and creating expenditures.
So, sorry, this is before you. What you have is the proposed budget for adoption for fiscal year 21-22. There were no changes in our budget committee meeting. I do want to point out one thing on the resolution. Before you read it, if you do decide to pass the resolution, there's one small typographical error in the very top. If you could look at the right under the title, there's $452,000 in the "be it resolved." If you read that whole sentence there, it says 452. It should be $462,000 as it says in the total requirements below. So when you do the resolution, please mention to correct that and approve it as amended, if you could. Are there any questions on the adoption of budget?
Seeing or hearing none, I would entertain a motion. I'm sorry. Let me get the right paper here. Sammy, is there anyone registered to speak regarding this?
No.
Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing at 6:52. And now, is there any discussion? I see Brian has his hand up. I'm not sure that's what he wants. Brian Harmon, do you have something to say?
I don't.
Apparently not. If there's no further questions or discussions, I will entertain a motion at this time.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-1-U, a resolution authorizing the Coburg Urban Renewal Agency budget for fiscal year 2021-21, creating expenditure appropriations and certifying to the county assessor a request for the Coburg Urban Renewal Agency plan area for a maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 457.
As amended.
Is that as amended, Director Fox?
Yeah, not the passing of the resolution, but the sum of $462,000 instead of $452,000. And I have a question about my motion. Is that fiscal year 2021-21, or should that say 22?
22.
22.
Okay, so I amend my motion to correct that error.
Thank you. Councilor Fox with a motion, amended motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor Lehman. All right. Just to make it all official, I'm going to read it again and try to make sure we get it all. We have a motion to adopt resolution 2021-1-U, a resolution authorizing the Coburg Urban Renewal Agency budget for fiscal year 2021-22, creating expenditure appropriations and certifying to the county assessor a request for the Coburg Urban Renewal Agency plan area for a maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 457. That motion is by Director Fox and second by Director Lehman. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand in front of the camera.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, directors. Is there any further questions or discussions? Ann, I do have the memo I wanted to bring up. Are you going to talk about that?
Yeah,
Do you want to go ahead with it or you?
sure. I can go ahead with it.
Okay, thank you.
We did send out a memo today from legal regarding the question that was raised at the budget committee. Gary is also on the line if you have questions for legal. But there was a question raised about whether the amount of debt that could be incurred by the city had either a total amount of debt or a date. And that memo was clarifying from legal that the $9 million is the cap on debt, and there is not a date in which the verbiage was a little confusing because it said whichever came first, but the legal memo that you received today does clear that up. We will retain that for a record because this question comes up often. And so I invite you, if you'd like to ask questions of Gary, you're welcome to do so. I did specifically push this to legal because this was very legal language and it could be a bit confusing for someone who doesn't understand what they're reading.
Any questions from directors? I think the memo clarifies it pretty well and it does come up every year. So I'm glad we've got this and we can carry it forward now. Do we have any other statements or questions regarding the URA from the directors? I'm going to close this meeting at 6:58. We're adjourned. We got 2 minutes before we can start the council meeting. So take a break.
Looks like we have somebody joining us that just is right here that says iPhone. Can you identify yourself, please?
Sammy, that's probably me, Henry. No? Maybe.
That be me?
Whoever me is, that's who spoke up.
Yeah, it looks like maybe it's John. Okay. Hi, John. I'm going to change your name on your iPhone.
Sammy, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. We're going to open the June 8th, 2021 City Council meeting. It's 7:01. Get to read this all over again. I will now call the June 8th, 2021 City Council meeting to order, 7:01. This meeting is being held via webinar with audio and video recording. To participate in this meeting, you must have registered with the city prior to the meeting. Presenters and members of the public, please mute your microphones and shut off your cameras at this time. When called on to speak or provide a presentation, unmute yourself and you may turn your camera on. During the public presentations and public comment portions of the meetings, participants may raise their virtual hand to be recognized if not signed up to speak. If this meeting is disrupted, we will recess for 5 minutes and return. If that does not correct the issue, the meeting will end and be rescheduled. Sammy, do you have the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know if anybody else did, but I never got any audio on that. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to do the roll call. So we have Mayor Smith, Councilor Lyman, Councilor Bell,
Roll call, Sammy?
Councilor McConnell, Councilor Lehman, Councilor Alexander, Councilor Blaine, Councilor Fox, Mayor Smith. We do have a quorum. I don't think Ray's hearing my sound. So we'll let him get this figured out and then we'll go into mayor's comments. Is everybody else hearing me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Smith, can you hear me?
Sammy, I have no audio.
Well, while he figures that out, there's no additions, changes, or deletions to the agenda tonight. In your packets, you will find written testimony for Richard Leach and an anonymous testimony. I believe both of those were about the TUF that weren't submitted as part of the public hearing. And Nancy, while he's figuring that out, why don't you pick up with the consent agenda? Do you mind
Sammy, I'm
doing
gonna
that?
log out
And
and come
then,
back in.
are you back? Okay. We can either recess for a couple minutes or
Okay. Sammy, do you want me to just ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda as written
yes.
or as presented? I will now entertain motions to accept the consent agenda as presented. Unless there are any changes or additions that anyone needs to make.
I do have a question.
Okay. Go ahead,
Uh,
Council Lehman.
Can we comment on the written testimony before going to consent agenda?
Sammy, what's your take on that? Yes?
Sure.
So the person who spoke about the TUF being attached to the water bill and not just those paying the sewer, it implies that someone who should be paying would not be paying because for some reason they have no water bill, but they have a sewer bill. If that's the case, can the language be changed to be that the monthly utility bill would be water and or sewer?
Is there ever an instance when they're paying sewer and not water? I don't have a problem with making that that change, Councillor Lehman. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Well,
those are tied together, right?
I can assume that somebody has a business or property where they only have water and not sewer. It would probably be very rare, but if that were the case, as implied by this letter, then perhaps the resolution of that would be that the TUF is applied to the monthly utility bill for anyone paying water and or sewer.
Looks like Brian Harmon has a comment. Nancy?
Oh, Brian, I can't see you, but go ahead.
I think that they may be referring to PVE. That would be the only subdivision that pays water and not sewer.
Pioneer Valley Estates, the
Oh.
neighborhood to the north. And I can hear everybody, so thank you, Councilor Bell, for taking over.
You're on, Mayor.
I don't know if does the ordinance actually, do we need to change any of the wording in that? Or is that, my understanding from that letter was that they thought it was the same and they should be separated.
Yeah, I'm confused. Sammy, are there two separate bills? It should be just one bill where the sewer is NA or something like that.
And I'm gonna let you answer that. She's been working on the rates.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ordinance right now to see if that even comes into play. So it's charged on the utility bill. For each billing unit with an active utility account or for occupied units not connected to city or water, but to the responsible party. So I'm not sure what it is going to be attached to the utility bill. And if for whatever reason someone did not have a utility bill, but they're the responsible party, they will start getting a utility bill for just the TUF. So I'm not really sure what this person is referring to.
Yeah, and when I read it, I think PVE or Pioneer Valley Estates came into mind, but it should be included in the monthly utility bill, but it should be attached to the water bill, not just those paying the sewer bill. And so Pioneer Valley Estates pays a water bill, but they aren't in the city, and they should not be covered by this. They just pay for a water service. And I kind of thought maybe that's what they were after, was to see that everybody that's paying a water bill to the city should be paying the TUF. And we can't do that to people that are outside the city. That was my understanding of this letter, was they wanted everybody to be paying who had a water bill.
Yeah, well, that would be nice, but I just think it should all be one bill where it just says NA. You don't have to pay for that because you're out of the area.
And I think I'll just make a note here that I think one of the things that I hear often, it surprises me, but people don't recognize or distinguish the difference between the water bill and the sewer bill. I guess they just look at the total amount due and say it's the sewer bill. I'm surprised at how many people I talk to in town that don't realize they're separated on that bill. And I wonder if maybe there's something we could do graphically that really shows this. But I look at it and it's very obvious to me.
Yeah, they're two separate bills, and one's antiquated, old, and the other one's new. And we could have Sammy testify how many times Council Fox has called questioning the bill about the water. This one's consistent, and the other one varies in the summertime.
I think
Go ahead, Sammy. You're muted.
we are an ACH, or we're becoming ACH. And so I think it's really common. I think people have to keep that in mind. A lot of people don't open their bills anymore unless there's a problem or a red flag. So we went from about 60 accounts 2 years ago using the ACH feature. And I think that we're getting up close to 200 now. So not quite half, but a big majority.
Yeah, I don't think about that. I guess that would explain some of it. Yeah. But Councilor Blaine.
I was just going to say, so to be clear, it's the sewer water is all the same bill. They're just, you can see it on the bill, for lack of a better word, separated, correct?
Right.
Yes.
So
Right.
a utility bill, customers get a utility
Right.
bill with a sewer rate and a water rate, depending on
Right.
where
And
they're
so
at.
I feel like, you know, this testimony is just maybe a little confused on the difference. I don't think there's anything, you know, over the top about it. I think it's very much just, they're just not understanding the difference. Am I wrong there?
That's my read on it, Counselor.
Okay.
Is there any other, Counselor Lehman?
Just a process question. When we get written testimony, do we ever routinely follow up with the person writing the letter to give some feedback? They may not be at the meetings where we discuss it or be tuned in virtually, but I was just wondering, do we routinely follow up and give some feedback or comment back to the persons writing written testimony?
Administratively, we tell people if they want a response back from council or from staff, it needs to come in as a citizen inquiry form. Then it's logged and it goes through the process and the policy that council has developed. When these are just comments that are being posted on our website, which we could reach out to them and create a citizen inquiry form, but that is not how we have been doing it.
I was going to say that this correspondence, because it's the city council's correspondence, it's coming to the city council. So if you want for the staff to reach out to Mr. Leach and respond to him, I'm happy to do so. But this is really a city council correspondence.
I just think it's good public relations to close the loop when people take the time to comment to the city council that they feel like they've been heard, and if there's a clarification that they can hear that, so they feel good that they were listened to and that was some kind of correction or response given.
Counselor Fox.
I nominate Councilor Lehman as the citizen testimony responder in kind.
Second.
I will say that if it's a significant issue that I typically do try to contact these people as mayor. I think they gave their input. I'm hesitant to start responding to every input because we do ask for input and we are getting more input. And if we start getting a lot of input and the expectation is to respond to every one of those in writing back to that person, I think the response to me is legitimate right here. This discussion is the response to me. And they brought about some discussion, so that was a good point, and that's what I believe is a response to it. Councilor Blaine.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's an inquiry form, like Sammy mentioned, if they were really wanting a response, they can go through the process. It's available. There's no reason for us to add to it, and then have the staff be like, all right, do you want to fill this out? Do you want to do a response? If you want to be heard, you can be heard anytime. You just go through the channel.
And,
So,
and
I
I agree
agree.
with that. That the inquiry form is the process where they would expect that. And I know staff offers that often, and it's rarely taken up.
And I would
So-
disagree with that because it's not often taken up because I don't think the citizens know about that. They write a letter and they don't know that there's another form they have to write another letter to or written statement to get some response.
Well, I talk with people often, and I know that the staff does, and I always encourage them to put in a citizens inquiry form, and rarely do they do it. Usually they just want to have an ear for a minute and go from there. They don't want that response, or they don't want to go through that formal process of writing it down on a piece of paper and giving it to us where we would do a response. And I'm going to say again that I'm hesitant to start responding to every reply that every statement comes in. Councilor McConnell. You're muted. There we go.
Right. Can't we just put that on the top of the, did this come into the web, to a web page or just to the city of Coburg? Isn't there a place where we can just put an announcement that shows up at the top that says, if you want a response, this is the form you have to take. And then you don't have to feel bad about never responding. That'd be pretty simple.
I think we could find a place for that.
That could be absolutely added to the website when we put out information on the website that we're asking for citizen response to.
All right, we got a long evening ahead of us, so I want to move on with this. I want to go back to Mayor's comments because I do want to touch on the move of the July council meeting. There's a lot of issues coming up on that meeting, and there's a lot of staff work on it. So after discussion with Ann and the staff prep for all of these things, I agreed with her that it was good to try and move this back so we have better preparation and presentation from the staff on these pretty serious issues. I think giving more time is always better, especially when we're looking at the tough and the other issues that could create some good citizen input. So we're going to move that meeting to the joint work session with the Planning Commission, and then have the council meeting after that joint work session. So there's no council meeting on July 13th at this time.
And so the new date is what day?
That will be July 27th.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And we already had a joint session planned with the Planning Commission. So we'll do that, and then we'll have the council meeting afterwards. Councilor Fox?
What was the July 8th meeting referred to by Ann last Friday? Did I read it wrong?
That was our regular scheduled meeting, which is now being rescheduled.
Okay.
All right. And with that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Councilors may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior to consideration. We have the prosecutor contract extension and the minutes for the May 11th, 2021 City Council. Does any councilor wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor Fox to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please hold your hand in front of the camera. I can't see Sammy, so I'm assuming she's got all those. And any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you, counselors. Any special guests, Sammy? Thank you. Ordinances and resolutions. Public hearing. I will now open the public hearing at 7:21 for the first reading of ordinance A163-S, an ordinance adopting the Oregon Criminal Code, Oregon Uniform Controlled Substances Act, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code, repealing conflicting ordinances. A staff report from Chief Larson.
Hi, everybody. This is an ordinance that we do every year. What it does is it allows the city to adopt the statutes for criminal codes, traffic violations that allows us to cite into the Coburg Municipal Court. If we do not do this, then everything would have to go through Lane County Circuit Court. And that's everything, unless people have any questions.
Apparently not, Chief. Thank you for a well-done presentation. Is there anyone registered to speak for this? No. Okay. I will close the public hearing at 7:23. Any questions, statements, or comments from counselors? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion. Oh, no, I won't. I will announce that the second reading is scheduled for July 27th, 2021. I will now open a public hearing at 7:23 and hold the first reading of ordinance A252, an ordinance adopting a transportation utility fee for the city of Coburg. A staff report from Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. Sammy, can you put up my PowerPoint, please?
Yes.
We do have a guest here tonight. Doug Gabbard is here. He's a consultant that we work with on our SDC fees and our SDC ordinance, has worked on our transportation trip schedule that we utilize to charge SDC fees. He's here tonight in the event after my presentation. If the council has questions regarding the use of the trip schedule for the transportation.
Are you seeing it, Andy?
I'm seeing it, yes. Can we move to 2, please? Slide 2. Okay, so can everybody see this? Okay.
Can you make it full screen?
I can't, but Sammy can. Okay. So I just wanted to touch on a little bit of history of the TUF. We have come a long way, and it started with a public comment regarding the condition of the streets. And there was a lot of comment. There was citizen inquiry. There were citizens that came to city council. And the council did appoint a citizen committee to look at this. The citizen committee met for over a year. They held public meetings. They held listening sessions. They met with consultants, engineers, and business owners. They conducted a community survey, and then they made a recommendation to the city council. One of their recommendations was to put a gas tax on the ballot, and that was done, and it was passed. That increased our gas tax to 6 cents from 3 cents. Then council gave the direction to design a transportation utility fee. And we started to engage the public. We put brochures out twice. We put information out on social media. We've included it in newsletters on numerous times, both the regular quarterly newsletter as well as special newsletters that went in the utility billing. Additionally, last year we sent letters to all businesses in Coburg. And then the discussion was put on hold due to COVID-19. The council again directed staff to begin the TUF project in March of this year. Staff designed the ordinance and devised a way to equitably charge customers. Council was asked to provide input on the ordinance and the fees. The ordinance was designed and reviewed by legal twice. Our fee schedule was designed, and we are now holding the public hearing for this. Sammy, we can go to the next slide. This is just a quick look at the condition of our streets. So it becomes important to point out that we have residential, industrial, and collector streets. While we have more residential streets, the industrial streets are a much more expensive street, and they're many times wider. They are built on a different base, and they are more costly to maintain and to build. We can go forward. So the transportation utility fee is charged on the monthly utility billing. All properties will be billed a fair share based on the use of the transportation system. They're imposed citywide, and they will either continue on until the council says to stop, or there might be a limited time. It provides a dedicated and stable funding source to finance ongoing maintenance operations. It also provides a funding source for debt. So if we need to borrow money, we can place the funding source as collateral for that debt. There's a standardized assignment of priorities and process for implementing the transportation improvements as prescribed by the pavement management system. And can you go up a little bit, Sammy? Because that's cut off on the bottom for me. That's okay. That's fine. I think what the bottom one said that I couldn't see is that all projects have to be engineered. And so while this is the projected amounts that we think it's going to cost, until each and every project is engineered, it's only projected. So that's the best we can do. The street funding committee recommendation was to charge $10 per month per residential unit and $7 to $10 per equitable unit for businesses. This is kind of what we are suggesting, but we don't believe that we need to charge $10. I think that we can charge $7. And so with this slide, I want to point out to 2022 where we anticipate that we need to raise $129,000. That's approximately $11,000 to $12,000 a month. And while the rest of the years we are projecting out with growth, and then we projected it in year 6, we would drop the fee. Council needs to be reminded that this is projection. Anything after 22. We need to get the process started, and at this time, what we know we need to raise is approximately $12,000 a month. And so this is just showing that getting started at that amount, this out here is future years that there will be growth or there won't be growth. And right now we're just projecting that there will be growth. And we will reach a time in year 5 or 6 where we get the big projects done, and we are left in a maintenance mode, so that we need to raise enough money to cover the maintenance of the streets. We can go forward. The cost of bringing the roads up to acceptable conditions is 3.5 million approximately. That's projected. For the industrial streets, that is 1.6 million. Residential streets is 550,000, and collector streets are 1,350,000. So we can go forward. Again, $11,000 to $12,000 a year. So being that the businesses are on the industrial streets and the collectors, so people are traveling on collectors to get to businesses, and businesses are traveling on collectors to get downtown. We have a lot of businesses at lunchtime who employees are traveling downtown to eat lunch at our restaurants. They're going to the market. They're using the collectors to get to work. And our residents use collectors too. So I'm proposing that the residents pay for the residential streets and half of the collectors, and the businesses pay for the industrial streets and half of the collectors. Even when the streets are county streets, the city still has a responsibility to maintain the right of way of those streets, and we still have to budget funds, and there is a cost to maintaining those right of ways. The monthly split comes out to $4,000 for residential and $8,000 for businesses, and we can move forward. When we look at that in a fee schedule, that a recommended fee schedule would be that the single family residential houses would be paying $7 per month. Apartments and residential condominiums pay a little bit less, in mobile home park and assisted living. Non-residential businesses would pay the same base rate plus 27 cents per associated trip. And we can move forward. The way we figure this is actually our transportation STC fee schedule that we use to attribute trips by business code. So you can look here, say for just one of the general light industrial buildings out on Industrial Way, the average trip is 8.84 trips per 1,000 square feet. So if they have 20,000 square feet, then they would multiply that by 8.84 times 27 cents. And I think I have this on the next slide a little bit more clear. So this is, so the business code again pays the trips per day times 1,000 square feet times 0.27. There are some differences in our schedule for a few types of businesses, such as gas stations are attributed by the pump, but it's still associated with trips. So there's so many trips per pump at the gas station. So an example would be a quality restaurant that is 1,500 square feet. The daily trip for that restaurant is 62.86. The total trips would be for 1,500 square feet would be 62.86. So times 0.27 is 25.46. So their total bill would be $7 plus 25.46. Does anybody have any questions about that? Councilor Fox?
I was just wondering how apartments and condos end up less than a residential home, since they all have cars and can travel the same amount.
Nationally, the trip standards say that people that live in apartments and condos drive less. And so that is just based on the national standard.
Okay.
Can we go forward, Sammy? So this is just showing the process that, I mean, we have given out lots of public information and we've invited public input, and we continue to do that. And now we're into the council decision-making process. The council has a lot to consider because it's not just financially, it's public safety involved. And it's also managing our assets and the sustainability of our streets. So there is a responsibility of the city to maintain our streets and to make sure that we're looking ahead and making sure we're addressing the pavement issues as they come up. This is just an example of the process. We have followed it. And I believe that we've provided lots of good information to our public. The important topics that are covered in the ordinance, the stated purpose, how the TUF is going to be charged, who will be charged. There will be an appeal process. There is low-income assistance. There is vacant property. If somebody's rental is sitting there vacant, they do have options to apply to not pay it while it is vacant. It will be charged on the utility billing. There will be an annual review of the fee. And there's also a discussion in the ordinance regarding what triggers a reduction or increase in the fee. We can go to the next slide. All of the future years and the total cost of fixing the streets is projections. There's a lot of influencing factors. So when we give a total of what we think it might cost, that's exactly, it's a projection. Gas sold, state shared revenues received, the cost of construction, and also development in the city or lack of development in the city. All of these things are going to influence the cost of these projects. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So when we were figuring out how would we charge these businesses, I did have a conversation with Doug, who consults with us often. He is the person or the company, represents the company who did put together our water and our wastewater platforms for figuring out our 20-year debts for those two utilities. And so I did call on Doug to help me figure out how we equitably charge these businesses. When I did talk to Doug, he suggested that we divide the $7 by the businesses, and that would have come up to 44 cents. But when I started pushing the numbers of what we needed to raise and what we would need to charge businesses and residents, the sweet spot of charging $7 base fee to everyone and then 27 cents per trip, equitable trip to the businesses seemed to be the sweet spot. So that's what I put on the schedule. But I really think it's a good idea for you to hear from Doug why it's important that we stick to the standardized trip, and especially the standardized trip schedule that you have already adopted as a council for SDCs. So I'm going to ask that Doug spend just a tiny bit of time discussing that.
Thank you, Ann. I am Doug Gabbard with FCS Group. I am delighted to be with our friends in Coburg again. Yeah, we did talk about the fee schedule that was developed for your transportation SDC. You know, SDCs, as you recall, are a charge for the development of new capacity in your transportation system. And so in order to charge a transportation SDC, you need a way to charge every new kind of development in an equitable way. And so we've already done some thinking about what it does each land use owe to the transportation system. Now, granted, SDCs and utility fees are not exactly the same thing. One of them is trying to pay for capacity and the other is trying to pay for pavement maintenance. But they are similar enough that for all reasonable purposes, it's a good idea to use the same schedule where it has been already thought through about how each land use differs. And so we really support the idea of using the SDC schedule as one of the inputs into the fee that you charge your non-residential utility customers, realizing that, and it was fun for me to watch and go through the calculus of various layers of the fee, because we have to do that same thing when one of my first assignments was in the city of Wood Village, and we had a transportation utility fee that we developed there, and we had to give different trip rates, a different multiplier for certain county roads versus local streets. And so very similar kind of calculus, and it was fun to see that replicated here. But using the fee schedule for SDCs as a basis and one of the key inputs to the charge, especially for non-residential, I think is a really smart thing to do and quite practical.
Thank you, Doug. Okay. Councilors will have time for discussion. We're still in the public hearing. And let's see, Sammy, do we have anyone registered to speak?
Yes, we do. We have Joe Morneau signed up tonight with Coburg Grange.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. Greetings to the mayor and councilors. Thank you for your dedication to the city. I respect what all of you do, as I've served on council myself, although that was 25 years ago and a lot of things have changed. I'm here to address concerns of nonprofits, all being considered equal. They really are not equal. That would be like saying all cities are equal. So Coburg and Portland would be equals, as they are both cities. Well, we all know that isn't true. They are not equal. Nonprofits are not equal either. Actually, there are about 3 dozen different types, 3 dozen different types of nonprofits that Congress has created over the years. Coburg has multiple within the community, from churches to rehab centers to fraternal organizations. The Coburg Community Grange is a fraternal organization where the objective of the mission is to support the community of Coburg. Everything the Grange does is for the community monetarily and through volunteerism. The Grange has partnered with the city for almost every event the city does. We supply many assets to the community, from tables and chairs to power boxes, dance floors, historic walls, sound systems, and storage. A fraternal organization is a social club that exists exclusively for the common business, a sodality of its members. Grange money stays in Coburg. We participate in the community, in community life daily. We continuously promote the city in all activities. These activities bring dollars to the community and businesses in the city. Donations to the Coburg community include many: park benches, bike racks, flags for light poles, no parking signs, road closure signs, Christmas in Coburg, block party, Halloween events, scarecrow event, and more. Our latest project now underway is working with the park committee members to upgrade and landscape the planters at Dairy Mart. The Grange also donates and supports the Coburg Charter School, the Fire District, Senior Lunch, Food Pantry, Police Department, and Public Works. While some nonprofits in the community have a huge daily impact on the community because of their daily activities, such as deliveries, maintenance, employees, residents, visitors, etc., so it is understandable that there is a need to fund tough. That being said, the Grange has zero, absolutely no deliveries or ever at the Grange or on their property. We have an average monthly use of about 8 or 9 days per month, with about 10 people average per event. So our monthly average impact to the community is about 90 persons per month. Other nonprofits reach those numbers daily or even hourly. My question today for all of you is, are all nonprofits equal? Do they provide equal and or all of their support to the community of Coburg, as the Grange does? The Grange is now and always has been very happy to pay our fair share of any and all costs necessary to support Coburg. Unfortunately, what they're proposing is taking money we already give to the community, its left hand, and moving it over to the right hand. The right hand funding goes to tough, period, end of discussion. Left hand money is constantly coming in to be used over and over again, whether it buys a park bench to be used daily for years, or bike racks or light pole banners that are used year after year. The money the Grange puts in the left hand multiplies every year and every time it's used. Based on your calculations for nonprofits, the base rate of $7 a flat month flat fee is a good base for all nonprofits. However, when your calculations based on square footage alone, rather than to consider the use or type of use, then you are no longer comparing apples to apples. Some nonprofits in our community have a daily impact much greater than the impact that the Grange and others may present. My objective here tonight is to help you understand why all nonprofits should not be equal. And hopefully I have at least given you reason to take another look at the blanket proposal you're presenting for nonprofits, along with the impact it will have on both the Grange and all the organizations that the Grange supports in our community. Thank you for your valuable time to hear the concerns of your local Grange, a fraternal nonprofit organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Sammy, do we have any other speakers?
That's it.
Okay. At this time, I want to close the public hearing at 7:47 and open it up to discussion for the council. And I would like to start with a response to Joe Morneau's concerns. I think all of the counselors were present when we talked about it last time, and the Grange was specifically mentioned, trying to be considerate of the effects that it would have on the smaller nonprofits with very little revenue versus other nonprofits that have significant revenue. And I think we're still trying to address that with the ordinance. And Ann is looking at doing a review of most of the businesses, if not all, to really sit down and look at how we best address what the true impact is of these businesses so that we can do a proper tough allocation. And I think all of us in that discussion were in agreement that we wanted to be very mindful of the impact on small fraternals, especially that do so much for the city, including the Oddfellows and Grange. And I think this ordinance will answer that. We do have I think we still need to look at low income assistance and apply that to the nonprofits if we can. Okay, any counselors have any questions, comments? Councillor Fox and then Councillor Bell.
With all these standardized federal reviews, I forget what it's called, that broke down the condos and apartments, is there a breakdown of the various nonprofit as Joe was alluding to? Because I also think about the food pantry, and people go there to get food who are low income, and they have a service, and so.
So I can answer that. Our schedule has a community center, which most of those things will fit into, versus a hospital, which there is a nonprofit hospital in the community. So I think there's a difference in, a fraternal organization, a church. We could list those on our schedule separately, specifically that they pay us. So we could list on our fee schedule that fraternal organizations pay the base rate if they have, if they operate as the Grange does. So there is room in the fee schedule to address a base fee for fraternal organizations differently than what would be charged another nonprofit or a community-based center.
Counselor Bell?
Just curious, and this question is directed to you. What sort of feedback are you getting from business members, from the fire district? Have you been able to talk to all of those people? Are there specific concerns being raised?
I did talk with, I had meetings with Steve Lee. I've had meetings with some of the business owners out in the industrial zone. There's some of them that have been communications that went back and forth for many months. We've been conversing. I have reached out to the fire district and talked to Chad. He's aware. They have not expressed concern over what the fire district would be charged. I reached out to the school. And I have not received a response back from them. I also reached out to Serenity Lane. Every business in town received a letter, and they've also received the brochures. It is the intent of the staff when the council, after tonight, when we get a little bit more direction, if we are moving forward with the fee schedule as recommended, that we will sit down with every business in town and take the time to do that, to have the conversation as to what the fee will be for them. But until we get to this point, it's kind of a waste of their time and ours. And I can tell you, it's very hard to get a meeting with businesses in Coburg. It's extremely difficult. So we can try our best to meet with them. Our hope is that we sit down with them prior to avoid the appeal processes that could come if it's a surprise on their bill.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Councilor Lehman.
I agree with Joe's position. I think he stated it very well. You could up front address it in the ordinance in the schedule, or you could simply listen to an appeal and then make your decision based on the merits of the appeal.
We could do that as well.
I think our lesson learned was we don't want to get too specific in the ordinance of this business, that house. We want to refer it to a schedule that we can deal with, is my understanding. So if we can make that trip schedule work for us, and then through the appeal process, rather than specifically wording it in the ordinance that, nonprofits or fraternal organizations, we put it in the list that it refers to rather than specifically putting it in the ordinance. Is that right, Ann?
Yeah. So fees are not in the ordinance, and the purpose of that is that the council, remember that the ordinance says the council, we revisit this every year. So the last thing you want to do is update an ordinance every year. So that's why we push for fees to not be included in ordinances, but they're by resolution, updated by resolution annually. And so that fee schedule that we design is what will be updated by resolution annually. If you remember how we do our SDC fees, annually in January, you have a resolution to update the SDC fees, and not the SDC resolution or the ordinance. So, so if you were going to spell out how a fraternal organization is charged, it's best to put it onto the fee schedule, or say we're just going to allow for those organizations to appeal.
Does that national list have something like this where we could use it, or are we going to have to customize this somehow to answer? Because I agree with Councilor Lehman that I'd really like to have some reference to where we aren't going through an appeal process or something, either once or all the time, if we can list it somehow.
Yeah, so I would say that listing fraternal organizations onto the fee schedule, and you know, simply saying they pay the base rate if they have less than 100 trips a month or whatever. Or you could base it on how many trips a month, or you could just simply base it on a fraternal organization is paying the base rate of $7.
Counselor Fox?
Do we have any other example toughs where that we could reference that might have been this sensitive?
A really good one that you can go and look at that I have sent people to is Hillsborough. Their fee schedules are much more complicated because they have many things that we don't have. So they charge things differently depending on what kind of business code. But they do address some of these things. So that's a good one to look at. But their fee schedule is much like the one that I have prepared. It's just ours is very simplified. We're a tiny town in comparison to Hillsborough. Mayor?
And the part, I think the discussion that we had was the revenue basis. Is that something that we can put in without facing possible issues down the road where not only trips, if they're less than 100 trips a month or whatever those trips may be, but also if they're below a certain revenue, can we put that in to the ordinance?
Well, we certainly can. We actually did have in the ordinance something for fraternal organizations, and then the council elected to not have it in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was taken out, and we can certainly put it back in. Yes, you could list that. You could list fraternal organizations pay the base rate, or the fraternal organizations pay, you know, however you would like them to pay, but you just don't state the fee.
Any other questions from counselors? Counselor Bell, are you sticking that finger up at me? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I just pulled up the Hillsborough Tough, and I do see on here too that there is a motor vehicle discount, that households where no one owns a motor vehicle, there is a 30% discount. 1 year discount, or until the household owns a vehicle. So, you know, you're right, Ann, there are lots and lots of different things in this Hillsborough Tough, which would be very interesting for us to review.
I think that when you're considering those kind of exemptions, you have to consider staff capacity of how we're going to follow this up on an annual basis. And so while, I mean, we can certainly put it in, that creates a task that we have to do on an annual basis to send something out to those households to say, do you still not own a car? So just certainly, I just want to bring that up as
I look at our appeals form, you know, it really is a pretty good form. And it's submitting it because you don't like the code assigned or the square footage or the associated trips assigned. So I don't think that we need to write everything in. I do think there is a process. What we do with fraternal organizations is something different, but thank you.
Councilor Lehman?
And do you have the dollar amount that the Grange would, or what they would pay per year under the
standard?
Mhm.
I don't have
under the standard or the schedule as
I
we
can
have.
figure it out very fast. Joe, can you give me the square footage of the Grange?
I would say 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
You're talking full property or just the building?
Yeah. property, so they would pay $7 plus $37.29 a month, because for a community center, it's 46 46 trips per 1,000 square feet. So you're taking 46 times 1,000 times three, so 3,000. So which comes out to then you're times it times 27 cents. So they're looking at a between $44 and $45 a month bill for the Grange.
And what would Joe feel is fair?
I think that's an exorbitant amount. Yeah, we're already paying $140 on our water utility fee, and that's a total different discussion that we'll have later, but it's the same type of deal. We don't do showers or dishes or laundry or any of that, and in there, and we're paying $140 a month. I paid less in my house when I lived there, when I had my house in Coburg. So there's just, like I say, I just think we need to take a good hard look at these fraternal organizations, because they're in their own class. They're not part of everything else we're doing. But that's, again, that's Joe's opinion. So,
Councillor Alexander.
Can we add deductions to the appeal part for what an organization donates to the city? And then create a fee based off of what they're already donating and giving to the city?
I think that's another follow-up issue with staffing. I think I'm trying to think of how much this really would affect our total income of $11,000 to $12,000 a year, and whether it's worth trying to really manipulate a lot of things where we could just probably write into the fee schedule that fraternities pay a residential rate or something, rather than trying to make it more complex and verify data to set that.
Okay.
And I saw Councilor McConnell. Did you raise your hand?
I did.
And Lehman, and then Blaine.
So I don't know exactly how we would go about doing this, but given that the Grange basically spends everything, every resource is going back to the community. I don't know how we would figure it, but if we went through an appeal process, could they become an exempt organization? And I don't know how, I don't exactly know the form for doing that, but they're one of the few organizations that we have in Coburg who exist just to contribute to the community. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think we all agree with that, and we're just trying to figure out how to make the ordinance work so that we don't slight somebody else or get in trouble in some other area. We all agree that the Grange does nothing but total commitment to the community. It's how do we take care of that element and not get into trouble in other areas.
Make them an
Councillor,
exempt organization.
and if we can put that in there, then I agree with that. I totally agree. Councillor Lehman and then Councillor Blaine.
I would just think the easiest way is just to allow them to submit an appeal and have it judged on the merits of the appeal. That way you don't set precedent for all fraternal organizations when you set the rate for category.
And Councillor Blaine, then Fox and Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Lehman, I think that makes sense. I think the hard part is once we start doing that, go down that appeal process, is like it's going to be over and over, and that's going to add a lot of work to the staff and the city. The hard part is I totally agree with the Grange giving back to the community as a whole. It's just there's plenty of churches. There's Serenity Lane. those are drivers of traffic that use our roads and they use all of our side streets. And at some level, if you're going to do business in the city, you have to be a part of it. I mean, all the citizens are, and anybody that comes in and out needs to be a part of that. And to me, it comes down to, do we want to fix the streets or do we not? And at some level, it costs money to fix the streets. As horrible as it is to add that fee to our citizens, I don't want to. I mean, trust me, I would love to reduce it, but at some level, we have to either fix the streets or ignore them. And I feel like we have to go down that road. So that's just my 2 cents.
Councillor Fox, and then Joe Morneau.
I agree with Councillor Lehman in the sense that, it should be the appeal because if I'm tracking correctly, the Grange must fall under a 501c7 organization as a social club. And Rotary would fall under that, and a country club would fall under that. And obviously, they are totally different organizations. So given the fact that it's under this, and it's not a nonprofit, if I'm tracking correctly, 501c7, it's a unique one that gives back to the community. And so we should look at its uniqueness on a case-by-case basis.
Joe?
Yeah, we are a nonprofit, Councillor Fox. The Grange is even as a fraternal organization. I agree with both what you guys are saying. Let's keep it simple. If we have a flat fee of 15, 20 bucks a month, my biggest concern is I honestly feel we need to take a look at the differences between what I talked about in my presentation was, we're not a hospital, we don't have that kind of traffic. They have more traffic in a day than we would have in a month or 2 months. So that's the concern I have. Why would we pay what they pay? I want to pay my fair share, but let's look at the capacity, the use, and what comes into the Grange. Forget all the donations and all that. Let's just shove that out the window and let's look at the bottom line. Do we need to pay the same amount as a hospital in Coburg? I think the Grange and I think the Oddfellows Hall are both in the same class, and I think that they should both be given a little bit of a reprieve based on their community centers supporting the city.
Well, Joe, first of all, there's nowhere, none of those organizations, the Oddfellows or the Grange, would come anywhere close to what Serenity is going to pay for a bill. But even with using these numbers from the Traffic Institute, the bill's still high, as you say. And so we want to soften that impact, it seems, as a community. And again, I seem to go back to all the time, can we relate it in the appeal process to revenue? Because if you're a country club, you've got some big revenue probably, and you don't need to get assistance. But if you're the Grange or the Oddfellows in Coburg, and your revenue is just like anybody else in the community when we do residents. If they have a low income, we give them assistance or give them a waiver of fees. And I think that to me seems to be the easy way to deal with the nonprofits, especially the fraternals at this time, is to somehow validate that, because we're going to have a policy on this, because if the Grange gets it, who else is going to get it? And they've got a $300,000 a year revenue base. So I really want to see that attached to a revenue or something that would be the justification for giving that break.
Mayor, I will have to look at, I will have to consider that as to if that's something that would go into the ordinance or into the fee schedule. So I can come back with a recommendation on that next time.
I would hope.
I think we would have to look at some different options there.
I would hope we could get it into the fee schedule or a policy under the appeal.
Okay.
Councilor Fox.
Could annual budget be part of the equation? I couldn't imagine Oddfellows or Grange has much of a budget.
That's what my argument is something like that, where you have a low budget, low revenue, and it's just not justified. And I get it about all the utilities. If the building's used a half a dozen times a month and they're still paying all the high base fees that everybody else pays, we all get that. We've heard that over and over again as counselors and citizens. We have the same issues personally. So I understand that, and we know it's tough. We try to be reasonable. I think all councils in the past have also tried to do that too. And what kind of things do you need tonight from council to move forward?
You know, the council gave polls, they gave input on the poll that they sent out. The ordinance was changed according to the poll. It was already reviewed by legal. So at this point, if there's any other parts in the ordinance that the council would like to question or discuss, we can do that. Otherwise, this is the first reading, and unless there's suggested changes, it would come back for the second reading.
Did councilors have anything specific to the wording on the ordinance? Councilor Lehman?
I had a question on the chart, year 6, if we could go to that for a second, that Ann presented. So
that was when we were going to drop the fee and the projections.
Yeah. So the clarification is year 6 when all the new construction and the major renovations of the streets is expected to be completed. And that's why.
Yes.
Pardon me?
Tentatively, yes. That's also when the counselors were looking at the different scenarios that I presented to you. That financial scenario was the one that the majority of you liked the best, that you said you could support the $7. And so that was the one I was using to kind of come up with what we needed to raise in the first year as we got this started.
And so in year 6, I'm assuming the amount that we need for maintenance, that's inflation adjusted, is factored into that.
That would be dropped. I think we dropped it to $5 at year 6, and then we would have to figure out what that would mean for the businesses as far as the secondary charge.
Thank you.
I want to just put some relationship to the previous times, and I know Councillor Fox can relate to it, and possibly others, that the sewer fee, when we first set that, the projection was that we were going to start at this rate, and every year then on was going to go up $5. And it hasn't, obviously. Now, we're doing the same kind of thing. Ann has to look into a crystal ball and figure out how much growth we're going to have in the community and what are the costs, and lay out these estimates and project them into the future so that we can finance these big projects and move down the road and still have a stable maintenance base when we're done. I think one of the things that we learned from the sewer was every year we have that annual review where we look at it. And that's where FCS was really great in helping us make that dashboard to be able to have that annual review. Our intent is to do that same thing with this TUF, to look at it and see if we get a significant grant, or all of a sudden one of them costs more, we have to be able to look at those and adjust them. So they are projections, but I think they're very conservative projections and realistic. But we all know what it's like looking in that crystal ball. We could only hope that we get lucky and we get some good grants, and maybe we're able to lower the fee even before the 6-year cycle. But they're all guesses. They're all projections. Solid projections, I think, for now, what we've got, though.
And I would be suggesting that we build the same platform that we did for water and sewer, so that we can use it for analysis annually.
Are there any other concerns, questions, statements from counselors regarding the TUF? Again, we have a second reading on July 27th.
Mayor, you have some counselors with their hands up.
I'm sorry, I was looking down at my script. Okay, Counselor Blaine and then Lehman.
I was just going to ask the staff kind of like, are we going to do another kind of hit to the community on the TUF to make sure that we get as much input as possible back? I mean, I know you guys have been, but to even push it even further before that second reading so we can see if we get anything different coming back. I know it's limited with Zoom and all the, everything else, but is there anything else that we're trying to do, or that as a counselor, I can help push that out there even more? Because I mean, I'm trying to have as many conversations as possible, but just kind of get that out there so everybody knows what's going on, and if they have an opinion, bring it to us so we can evaluate it.
You're muted, Ann.
I suspect we will put together another mini newsletter to go in the utility billing. And what I try to do when I do those kind of things is hit the community in 3 different ways with them. So we will put it out in the utility bills. We will put it out on social media, but we may also put it in an envelope and mail it to all the businesses. I would say in the first week of July, we will make sure that the community is very aware that on July 27th, the council will be hearing the second reading for this.
All right, I have Councilor Lehman up, but I just want to make a statement that Ann and I have talked about this, and it's just eerie how the response, I don't know if we've educated them and they're all okay with it. Zoom meetings actually are better. When you look at the numbers, more people watch us on Zoom instead of attend the meetings. So we've been getting the message out there, but the people I've talked to is like, well, I've been hearing it for a year. Okay, let's do it. So that it's eerie how quiet it is. It's like, are we doing it right here? Maybe we are. Councilor Lehman.
So it's approximately $3.5 million that we're needing for our street improvements and repairs. Is that correct, Ann?
Yes.
And we're doing that over a 20-year payback on a bond or a loan?
No, on streets, you can only borrow for 10 years.
Okay, so we need to raise the $125,000 or so per year on the TUF as evidence that we can repay the loan, but we're repaying it over 10 years.
You're paying it over 10 years. So we would provide a budget when we're applying for funds. And so in the first 5 years of that, we would be showing that we're doing these capital projects. And then in the years after that, we would be combining the state shared revenue, the gas tax, and all of those things that support the street department. That would support that we can provide maintenance and support to the debt at the same time.
Because we've also dedicate general fund monies every year for street repairs and improvements too. So we have gas tax, TUF, and general fund and grants. Those are the 4 revenue streams.
No, we do not provide general fund money to the streets. That is not in the budget.
We have before, but we aren't as a rule now.
It had a few skinny years, and so the general fund jumped in to try to boost it up a bit. But it's actually operating right now in the black and is not really needing general fund right now.
So $3.5 million divided by $125,000 a year would take about 28 years to pay it back. So how do we pay it off in 10 years?
So the key in that is in those 10 years, we have some grant funds that come in. So if you remember the presentation that I provided you, we have already received some grant funds committed to the city of Coburg. And so that will offset some of that.
And don't forget the gas tax
And the gas tax.
and state shared revenues that relate to roads.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay, I am going to announce that we have a second public hearing on July 27th with this regarding the TUF. And we're going to move on to our next public hearing. We have a pretty, oh, go ahead, Ann.
Mayor, you reminded me to ask Gary if we wanted to leave the public hearing open or that we could continue to receive comment, or should we close it and have another one?
Exactly. Should we continue or should we close this one and open a second hearing, Gary?
You can do either or both. I mean, you can leave the record open to receive additional comments. And then at the next public hearing, reopen the public hearing for additional input at that time and discussion of any inputs you've received in the interim period.
And Ray, that's how it's been noticed. That's how it was noticed in our pamphlet. That's how it's been promoted on all of our other documents, that we were holding a public hearing today and on the 27th so far. So it just changes the way that we present the information to you. If we leave it open, you will still get the information, whether you open it on the 27th and then close it again.
Yeah.
So either way, we're able to get it to the record. If I close the meeting now,
yes,
anything that comes in, we'll just carry it into this. We'll make it record in the next meeting.
Anything that comes in regarding the TUF will go in as a written or they're allowed to come talk to you again, just like this meeting. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
it's been a long
Gary.
time since I've had to do that. Thank you, Gary. And thanks for reminding me, Ann. All right. We're going to, didn't I already close the public hearing? Yeah, that's what I thought. So we'll have the second hearing, second reading on July 27th regarding the TUF. Public hearing on 2021-08. I will now open a public hearing at 8:23 on a resolution 2021-08, a resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenues. Tim?
Yes, resolution 2021-08. This is a yearly housekeeping task that we have to do. It's really just the choice of whether we accept the state shared revenues or not. We don't have any control over the rates. Those are set by the state. We use the rates to estimate what we should receive based on our population, which is 1,375. You can see the specific amounts on page 48 of the agenda. And keep in mind that these do not include the city gas tax. That's completely separate. Do you have anybody have any questions for me on this?
Sammy, do we have anybody to speak?
We do not.
Thank you. And I will close this hearing at 8:25 and ask counselors if they have any questions or discussion. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-08, a resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenues.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilor Blaine and a second by Councilor Alexander to approve resolution 2021-08, a resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenue. All those in favor, please hold your hand in front of the camera.
Got it.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, counselors. Resolution 2021-09, a resolution declaring the city's certification of eligibility for state shared revenues. Staff report from Tim.
Yeah, so this resolution basically is saying that we are eligible based on what the state requires to receive the state shared revenues that we just spoke of. We are eligible based on the services we provide. Pretty simple, and if there's any questions, I would love to entertain them.
Looks like we're done with that one. Any council discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-09, a resolution declaring the city's certification of eligibility for state shared revenue.
I second it.
Thank you. There's a motion by Councillor Alexander with a second by Councillor McConnell to adopt Resolution 2021-09, a resolution declaring the city's certification of eligibility for state shared revenues. All those in favor signify by holding your hand up in the camera.
Got it. Thank you.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, councilors. Resolution 2021-10, a resolution adopting the salary and classification schedule for fiscal year 2021-22. Tim?
Yeah, so this resolution is to adopt the salary schedule that we proposed at the budget committee. It does include a 2% cost of living for all staff. We look at what other cities do, and we fall kind of in the middle where everyone else is, when on the high or the low end. We're still working on a salary survey. We had a couple cities that didn't respond to the survey. We'd like to get those responses before we see how it compares. And we will have a council meeting on that work session, sometime early in 21-22. Anybody have any questions on this resolution?
Councillor Lehman.
Just a comment, last time Councillor Fox asked about the cost of the reserve officers, and the comment was there was no budget or salary or pay for officers. So what are the numbers at the bottom of the salary schedule where it has reserve officer?
I can answer that. Occasionally, there is work that we have to pull a reserve officer in to help out. And I can use an example of one time we needed some help in the evidence room, but just anyone can't go into the evidence room. It has to be someone who is trained and able to go in there. So we hired a reserve officer to help David with that work. We generally budget a little bit in the police budget for that. It's included in the overall police. I think it's $1,500 a year that we can pay an officer or a reserve officer to help. And if that happens, then we pay them on this scale.
So it's budgeted $16.31 an hour and a total of $33,924.
That is the scale, but in reality, the budget is much less. It's a very minimal amount of hours that would be paid out.
So I would just maybe question why we have it on a salary schedule as opposed to some service contract.
So Ann, is this just the scale that we would charge with, and the extension to that 33,000 is a annual for a scale reference?
That would be a full-time position. The reason that we included it in here is for auditing. The auditor does require that all of our employees are paid on a scale, and they do check. So if we have an audit and we have a reserve officer who was paid for 15 hours of work, that auditor is going to go back and say, show me on the scale how you paid this reserve officer. And they're going to check it. And if we haven't paid according to the scale, then that would be right up in our audit. And that's why it's included. Everybody has to be paid on the scale.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-10, the fiscal year 2021-22 City of Coburg pay scale.
Second.
I'm going to give that to Councilor Blaine. There is a motion by Councilor McConnell and a second by Councilor Blaine to adopt resolution 2021-10, a resolution adopting the salary and classification schedule for fiscal year 2021-22. All those in favor, please hold your hand up for aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Tim. I will now open the public hearing at 8:32 for resolution 2021-11, a resolution adopting the city's budget for fiscal year 2021-22, creating appropriations, setting the tax, and imposing the tax, and categorizing the tax. Staff report from Tim.
Yeah, so this resolution is to adopt our budget, basically, to give us authority to spend money and receive money. We had 2 budget meetings for the city this year. There were no changes between the 2 meetings from the budget committee. Staff did find a few changes that we discovered, and we addressed that in the second meeting. Those were a $1,000 increase for our IT expenses, a $5,000 increase for the purchase of a new lawnmower, and a $63,500 adjustment to the transfer from the URA to match what they were transferring into us. I'll entertain any questions.
Hearing none. Sammy, do we have any public comment? Thank you. All right. I'll close this meeting at 8:34. Close the public hearing at 8:34. And any discussion or debate? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-11, a resolution adopting the budget for fiscal year 2021-22, creating appropriations, setting the tax, imposing the tax, and categorizing the tax.
Second by Councilor Alexander. We have a motion by Councilor Blaine and a second by Councilor Alexander to approve resolution 2021-11, a resolution adopting the city's budget for fiscal year 21-22, creating appropriations, setting the tax, and imposing the tax, and categorizing the tax. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The budget passes unanimously. Thanks to staff and the budget committee and us counselors here. It went well and it was a lot of work. And thank you, Tim, for the work that you put into it. The city is amazing to me. We've got a lot of things going for a small city. Resolution 2021, Councilor Lehman?
Just that we had talked about getting a list of the top 10 increases, either by total dollar or percentage, and it didn't hold up a vote for the thing, but if the staff has that, we'd like to see that at some point in time.
You're muted, Ann, but I know Ann was working on it.
Yeah, we do have it. I'm sorry. I thought that was sent out. I will make sure it gets sent out.
Thank you.
I probably just neglected to follow up with that.
Thanks for the reminder, Councilor Lehman. Okay. Resolution 2021-13, a resolution authorizing the city to seek state transportation funds through the 2021 Small City Allotment Grant Program. Brian.
Good evening, everybody. This is a resolution that comes around every so often. This grant is a grant that pays for streets like Mill Street and Roberts Road. So what we're looking at is requesting the funds to help upgrade East McKenzie Street from Willamette to Harrison. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Brian. Hearing no questions, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2021-13, a resolution authorizing the application to the Oregon Department of Transportation for the Small City Allotment Program grant for an amount up to $100,000.
Second.
Second.
Councilor McConnell got it that time. There's a motion by Councilor Alexander and a second by Councilor McConnell to approve resolution 2021-13, a resolution authorizing the city to seek state transportation funds through the 2021 Small City Allotment Grant Program. All those in favor, please signify by hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Alley encroachment and vacation. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sammy, will you please pull up my slides? All right, thank you, everybody. So if you remember back in April, we first brought this issue to you, and we were directed to go and get a survey of the alley to see just what is encroaching into it. So that has been completed. This survey is included in your packet. I hope you've had a chance to look at it. I'll briefly describe what you're seeing here. You can see several structures encroaching up to 8.5 feet into the alley. There are also two fences, a 6-foot wooden fence and a chain link fence. Next slide, please. I'll just also add everything you're seeing in these slides, there's only 4 of them, is included in your packet. So myself and Gary have both looked at this issue, and Gary has formed a legal opinion. The alley is an easement. It is not fee owned by the city. It was dedicated in 1902 to the public as part of Coleman's second addition to Coburg. And Oregon courts have assumed that unless otherwise explicitly stated, dedication to the public is an easement. Now, this is an important distinction because it's an easement and not fee owned. The adjacent property owners do not have to pay for the land if vacated. Next slide, please. There are some considerations we'd like to discuss tonight. Now, the alley should probably be vacated. So the next question is, well, does the city want to initiate that and sponsor that process? Or does it want to tell the property owners to, hey, petition the city for vacation? That is what we're asking for tonight. Those are some of the options for you to consider. And another issue that will arise if vacated, while it's not the city's problem, is trespassing issues. And this is because the alley is 12 feet in width, and some of those structures protrude past that 6 feet line, that midpoint in which the land would revert back to the adjacent property owners. So as you've seen on the survey, there are one or two of those structures that protrude past that point and would technically encroach into the adjacent property now. And lastly, I have spoke with Brian. We are fairly certain there are no city utilities underneath there. However, Public Works is going to take one last deep dive into that issue to make sure. So lastly, like I said, if there's no appetite to do nothing, then the alley needs to be vacated. And that essentially brings you down to two options. Either the city does it, or you tell the property owners to petition the city and submit a land use application to vacate the alley. That's essentially what it comes down to.
Questions or comments from council? Councilor Blaine.
My only question is it has nothing to do with fire or police getting up and down that they don't access that alley at all? Is that not a concern?
That is not a concern that's been addressed to me. I believe Fire has looked at it. They didn't have any issues, and Public Works doesn't have any issues. In fact, I think it's the stance of Public Works that it should be vacated because they don't want to maintain it any longer.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I would agree with that 100%. If they want to vacate it, I think they go through the process, submit the application, and vacate. It's just my opinion.
Councilor Fox, and then Councilor Alexander. You're muted, Councilor Fox.
I would agree with that the owner should petition for the vacate because they're gaining property, and
Yeah.
that's to their benefit.
It is.
I would assume that their tax liability would go up as a result.
I assume so, yes, because there's 4 properties there that would all gain to benefit from vacation because they would literally gain additional square footage to their property. So I'm sure that would be a ramification of vacation.
Right. And so, they would also have to pay for, given the variance on the line, there's 7 feet, 8.5 feet. It varies up and down the alley. So on one side, they've encroached. So they would also have to pay for a property assessment of the size adjustment because it's not equitable unless the other side agrees to an easement.
Yeah, or you could adjust it through a series of property line adjustments. But yeah, like I said, it's an issue that arises out of vacation. It's not really a city thing, but I mean, the city can certainly help the property owners out and maybe negotiate between the property owners, but it's really not the city's issue to get involved in. It's just what's going to happen is if it's vacated. It's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to basically wait until they sell the property, go through title, lot line adjustments, make sure everything's there. Otherwise, until they sell it, it is what it is.
Councilor Alexander, you had a comment?
Yeah, is this decision setting a precedence for any applicable alleys in the city that are similar?
I don't know if any other situations in the city where there are obvious structures protruding several feet into the alley. There may or may not be. I can tell you that if any alley is going to be vacated, it would have to come through this process, just like we're doing tonight. Either the city can vacate it or the property owners can petition the city to vacate it. Vacations are not going to happen on their own without city action.
That works. One more question.
Go ahead.
If one owner of the 4, it looks like 6 though, right? 6 properties or just 4?
If you want to go back to the first slide, Sammy.
Exhibit map.
So I think the surveyor may have used a little older tax lot data because I did look in our lid. the property on the far left is Sammy's property, and then the property is next to Sammy's is actually one large property.
Okay.
Yep. So there are 4 owners, the 3 on the top, and then Sammy, and then the other person to the center and right, or 4 adjacent property owners.
So what if one of the owners can't pay more or doesn't want to pay more or be involved in that? What happens to the others?
That's a good question. I'm not sure there's an answer right now because according to the state law, you have to get the consent from all adjacent property owners to vacate. So this is really back on the property owners. They have to, the ball's in their court essentially, to work together and figure this out. Now I will note the issue was brought to the forefront by one particular property owner. So it may be that he or she kind of takes the lead on this, but that's all I can say at this point on that.
Councilor Lehman? Oh, you just muted yourself.
I would agree that all 3 or 6 property owners need to petition to vacate. We certainly don't want to have just a partial alley that the city maintains. And if I recall correctly from the last conversation, we can vacate the alley but still maintain an easement if we wish.
Gary, you might want to chime in there. I do not believe that's the case here.
No, once you do the vacation, property ownership changes. You don't have any property rights left.
Right, and that's why I asked Public Works to just verify, double check that there's nothing that the city wants underneath that alley.
So there are property owners on the south side of the alley and the north side that would both gain land, or is it just those on the south side?
It's literally those 6 rectangles you see there. The right through the center, it's 12 feet wide, so they each get 6 feet of that. That's how that would work. It just automatically reverts right back to the adjacent property owners.
Okay. And so all 6 would have to petition to participate in vacating, requesting.
Correct. Their petition would have to be consistent with the ORS, which kind of it sets the procedures for vacation. It's according to state law.
So I see Councilor Lane, but I have a question.
Oh, sure. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead. You were finishing, Henry?
Oh, I said their application and petition would have to be consistent with state law, and it's their burden to make sure that it is. The responsibility is on them.
So my question is, we look at the lower middle with the encroachment of the buildings there. What if the properties above did not want to participate in this vacation, and
Then
the lower property wanted all of that up to the existing north property line there up the alley?
Yes,
Can that be done?
It wouldn't happen.
Say
Go ahead,
that
Gary.
again, Gary.
Nobody's going to do that.
Gary, go ahead and say that again.
I don't think you could legally do that.
That's what I was asking though, because it looks like if the north properties didn't want it and the south properties took it, then that would take care of their trespass issue. Councilor Blaine, you had a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, as far as like the homeowner situation is, once we vacate, they have to go record that, get the plot map, go through the process to make sure that they add it to their property. I mean, that's all on them. It has nothing to do with the city. So I was just kind of putting that out there, that it's, once we vacate as a city, it is 100% up to them to take that, record it, and do what they want with it to make sure that their property lines are now adjusted properly.
That's right.
Other questions?
So
Councilor
question.
Blaine, are you a real estate agent? Because it sounds like you know about this.
No, I do. I do real estate investment. So this is what I do for a living: is buy, invest in real estate. Yep.
Sure. Okay.
Councilor McConnell.
So from the map, it looks like the owners of the 2 adjoining properties with the 2 buildings in the alleyway. From the diagram, it looks like they're over halfway. And so I believe it was our attorney who said that they couldn't take the whole thing, and yet what happens if the other party wants their half and they're over on their half? Just to throw another kink in it.
Well, the property owner that's being trespassed against can go to circuit court and sue them.
Oh, this is
Yeah,
going to get,
Yeah, like I said, it presents the trespassing issue, and it's not really the city's matter, but this is going to happen. I mean, the city can help out where it can.
But if we don't vacate, there's no issue.
If you don't vacate, it's just as is. That's just going to remain how it is. Mm-hmm.
Councilor Lehman.
Well, currently they're trespassing on city property, so the city could take action to have them remove their structure.
Gary?
Yes, that's correct. The city, the easement is in trust with the city, which implies the ability to manage it and keep it clear of buildings like that or that are obstructions. The downside is, of course, the city has a certain unknown amount of liability since it is the trustee of the easement. So if the city doesn't need it, the best situation is for them to give it back to the property owners and let them deal with the issues. And these are issues that the property owners could agree with before they went through the vacation, agree for property line adjustments or whatever, to resolve the trespass issues before a vacation was approved. But that entails a fair amount of communication and agreement between all those parties.
That's right.
And it has to be unanimous?
Yes.
Councilor Fox?
This is outside the box, but if someone was standing on the shed that was in the alley and fell off and hurt themselves, would it all of a sudden become the city's liability?
Gee, that's a really good question.
Time to vacate.
Arguably, if the city was going to retain trusteeship after the smoke clears here, I think the best thing for them to do would be, for the city to do, is to alert those individuals that they're trespassing into the easement. So at least the city has taken some action that asks them to clean up the problem. Once the city realizes there's an issue, they have a certain responsibility to deal with it, like a pothole.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we tell them, look, we'll vacate. You have to go through the process. Here's the situation. Apply. We'll grant it, and then you deal with it on your own. I mean, I don't think it's much of a conversation at this point moving forward. I mean, it's either the city needs it or we don't. Turns out we don't really need it. So let's vacate and then make them go through the process, and then we move forward.
But we can't make them go through the process, right?
Right. But if we vacate and say, here's your application, you get to gain this land, any smart homeowner is going to take that, right? For no cost. Otherwise, we've given them the option to vacate. So what else can we do?
We can condemn the property.
That's more of the question, I guess.
Yeah. I see Councilor Fox. I don't know what the answer is. Because it sounds like we could vacate and everybody could just ignore it and it'll stay the same.
Well, given the liability question I just rose, and if they chose not to vacate, or if some wanted to vacate and some sort of, stalemate happened where others didn't, could we condemn the property that's encroached on the city alley?
Well, it wouldn't be a condemnation action. You could go to circuit court for trespass if you chose to do that. That's one action the city could take.
Okay, I wasn't looking for, the worst. I'm just trying to think things through if they didn't, the ideal answer is that they all choose to vacate, but the variations of the property line, since it should be at 6 feet apiece, it's kind of a quandary.
Yeah.
Right. And if there isn't unanimity amongst the property owners, even if the city initiated the vacation, I don't think they could finally approve it. It depends on how many people objected. I think you can vacate it if a majority of the property owners agree to the vacation, will not object to it.
Councilor Lehman.
I made the suggestion at the last meeting where we discussed this, that we formally send a letter to all 6 property owners and identify the issues, ask the questions if they wish the city to vacate the property, and that they assume ownership of the property. Until we have that information, we really can't move forward.
Well, I don't think we want to send that letter unless we're going to vacate.
Well, I think we do send the letter to get information from them if they wish the city to vacate and that they are willing to assume ownership. If one or more say no, then we already have our decision made. We can't vacate the alley. And it's been brought that since we've known this issue for a few months now, and we've not taken any kind of action to reduce our liability.
So
we are taking that action.
What do we
right
do
now.
next?
I think we write the letter to the 6 property owners and ask if they wish the city to vacate the property and they're willing to assume ownership.
And if we do that, I'd like to have the predetermination that we are willing to vacate that property.
Vacate. Yeah.
We can do that. We can incorporate that with our
So
with the motion.
we write the letter. We explain to them that we will vacate if they want the property, but they just have to go through and do the application. Here's the application.
Yeah, and all 6 have to agree to it.
And then if not, we deal with the proposed liability and people encroaching on city land for how long?
Right. And that could be a 2-step process. It could be incorporated in an initial letter saying that that would be what our next steps would need to be, or we could just write that as a separate letter after we get the information.
I mean, are we all agreeing that, or not all, are we assuming that people actually aren't going to take this alley space? I mean, if that's you or me, or I'm assuming most humans, they're going to want to take that extra space.
Well, with the
exception, to give it to them.
Well, with the exception of those that are trespassing on the north side, the way it is now, they're just simply trespassing against the city, and they're hoping the city won't take any action. But if it is vacated, then the property owners on the north acquire that land, and then they have property that's trespassing on their personal property now. That might be a different.
So there's a foot, maybe, right? Is that the number?
It only takes an inch.
Well, it looks like the furthest it intrudes is 8.5 feet. So you're looking at 2.5 feet of intrusion at the furthest point.
2.5 feet. Okay. Well, again, I don't think that's our problem if we vacate. I mean, it's not our job to manage this situation once we're out of it, right? It's not our.
No, I was just responding to your question that you said, why wouldn't they want it vacated? They may not want it vacated.
Fox.
Yeah.
they may not want to, or someone may not want to vacate because they have tax-free property right now, and all of a sudden they have a new financial liability. So there is that mentality that can arise.
Well,
There's a whole bunch of things. This is a bit of a conundrum.
Yeah, I think what Council Lehman is proposing is probably a good way to go. We send letters to all the property owners saying the city wants to vacate the property. If they're all willing, then we can clean that all up as far as vacating the land. But we also state in the letter there is trespass issues, and no matter what happens, those trespass issues will have to be dealt with.
Correct.
If they don't want the property, then the city's going to have to act on the trespass. If they do want the properties, then they're going to have to fix the trespasses so that their neighbors aren't being trespassed on. And I hope we could do that in a letter and kind of encourage them to fix their problem and not make it ours.
May I ask a question here?
Certainly.
So the biggest concern from my perspective is the south property that borders Sammy's property. It's got two buildings on it. Is that a house or is that a shed or is it, I know the property, I know that it looks like they probably struggle a little bit with finances. Is this their house?
I think it's labeled as a garage and shed.
That's what it's labeled as.
It is not their house. It's
Yeah, I don't think it's their dwelling. Yeah.
Okay. And so if there were a dispute, they would have to take the whole thing down, basically.
Well, at least take it back to their property line.
Yeah.
Councilor Lehman?
And I do recall Mr. Cass said he was willing to move the property at his own expense.
That's right. He did say that.
Well, and that's where the letter would come in, and if all worked well, we could send a letter out, and if Mr. Cast is amenable to that and working with them to move the buildings, again, I think we have to take that step. I agree with Councilor Lehman's process of sending the letter, saying we want to vacate, and admitting, saying we're going to vacate, and then in the letter, make sure that we address the trespass issues that they will need to be addressed one way or the other. Councilor Fox.
Yeah, and if it all goes well, they also need to know if they grant a good old boy easement, that won't hold water once the property sells and a new owner comes in. So then there's always that thing, the handshake. You're only a foot over the line. I don't care. It's been like that forever. But transfer of property, that changes everything.
Councilor Lehman.
And I would include in the letter, since they've not been privy to our discussion, that all 6 of the property owners must agree to the vacation for this to go forward.
It's 5 property owners.
It's
5 property owners. The 2 lower right ones are 1 property owner.
Okay, but they would make the decision on both. So there's 2 decisions there.
Any other questions or comments?
Is there a liability or not a liability, but is there a financial impact if the city chooses to vacate or if the property owners put forth the vacation request?
Yeah, I would say, and maybe Anna can speak to this too. I would say that that would just take staff time. That would be resources that the city would spend to initiate this process. It'd essentially be a city-sponsored initiative. Whereas if you put it on the property owners, they would submit the land use application, pay the annexation fee, and go through that process. The burden would be on them. Whereas if the city wanted to do it themselves, the city would do it on its own initiative, essentially.
So we need to be careful with the wording of the letter that we send out.
And if what I'm gathering is correct, city council wants the property owners to petition the city. And in that case, they would have to pay the land use, the vacation fee, and submit the land use application to city council.
And then you all have
I was going to say, could we just tell them they can buy it, sell it to them?
The city, Gary, you can back me up on this. The city does not own that land fee, so it cannot just sell it.
Okay. Okay.
It is an
It's
easement.
an easement.
Okay. Sorry.
Councilor McConnell, you had something?
no.
I'll
No.
tell you, I can't see the upper, if you're raising your hand, I can't see your hand, so I might miss you. Okay. Well, it sounds like we've got a plan. Does somebody want to make a motion? Councilor Lehman.
I move that the city contact all property owners of this alley to inform them that the city wishes to vacate the property and desire input from the property owners to indicate their willingness to petition the city to vacate the property.
Second.
Sammy, have you got wording for that? Are you okay with it?
I do, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Councilor Lehman's motion to notify the property owners and the city's intent to vacate and asking them to activate the appropriate response to absorb that land into theirs.
Mr. Mayor, I've been trying to get your attention for the last few minutes.
I'm sorry, there's only so many screens on here because of the other one. Go ahead, Brian.
Totally okay. I got two things. The shed on that southeast corner of North Miller has been removed, just so you're aware. And also, I had a question about the easement, and Henry or Gary, you can answer this for me. If it's an actual easement and not a public alley, can we dictate what kind of access people have in that easement, or what kind of activities they can do?
Point of order, we have a motion and a second.
Point taken. We have is there any discussion on the motion?
I mean, I'm curious, Brian's question. I mean, I'd like to hear that response.
Okay, we have to have the motion withdrawn to have the discussion then.
Well,
Gary,
I mean,
do you want to?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, I won't speak until the floor has been cleared.
Sure.
Councilor
I was
Lehman,
just gonna. Oh yeah, Councilman.
do you wish to withdraw the motion?
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, now apparently the councilors want to hear what Brian is saying and Gary's response.
Okay, my response to Brian is that as the trustee of the easement, the city can manage it. In other words, preserve it for its purpose, which is access, and everything that goes along with that in terms of finding people that encroach, having them move, suing them if you have to, or do nothing. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, in a very roundabout way, but yes. I think the whole premise of this was one property owner wants to be able to access a new developed lot. So not being able to do that because someone else is encroached. I want to make sure that if this is just an easement, what kind of access does that person actually have the ability to do? That's kind of the question, but I think you answered it, Gary.
Okay.
Well, we already have structures into it and we're declaring a trespass on those. So that's what's going to happen if a developer's looking to get a little more land and it's still the city's easement. It exists already and we don't want a developer to create more of that. So the vacation would take care of that, in my opinion, by giving them that land to go to a new property line and be able to build to that.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like the property owners at this point need to take it from here if we vacate and they go through the process with the city, and then they can deal with the ramifications of whatever that ends up being on their end. I feel like we need to step away from that if we're not actively using that and we don't want to maintain it and we don't want to remove their structures from it. If we want to do that and we need it, that's a different conversation.
Okay, council. I don't know that that changed any of the direction that we're looking for. So I would look for a motion that was well stated before.
I have a question.
Councilor McConnell.
Going back to the original request regarding this alleyway, Mr. Cast said that the owner of that property wants to be able to get into their property from that south, what right now is an alleyway. We are saying we're going to vacate it and you're going to have to negotiate where the boundary line is, and that property owner is not going to be able to access their property from the back of the property now. It's not our problem, but it could become Mr. Cass' problem if he has sold that property to someone with the idea that they would have access to the back of that property. Just saying. We could be opening a can of worms.
I think we're already in the can of worms and we're trying to empty the can of worms so that they can go away. If we do all the suppositions of what each one of them could do, I think, we could be here for 2 nights. It's a question of the city looking at this, and I think it is a can of worms already. And if we try and work with every single individual property owner to see what's best for them, we'll never find out what's best for all of them. I think we need to go forward with what we're trying to do, and that is to make that available. As far as Mr. Cast, he has the potential to gain 6 more feet if that alleyway is opened. Is that right? Whatever it is, he has enough. Maybe that's what he's looking for, is to get enough to be able to drive back there on his own property. Either way, I don't know that I want to accommodate one individual to see if that's going to work when we've got 6 properties here that are affected, and it is a can of worms. There's trespass, there's all kinds of issues with it. And I think vacation is probably the best thing to do, and to see if they can work it out. Any other comments from councilors? Councilor Lehman?
Are we ready for a motion?
I think we are. We're always ready.
Yeah.
I move the city notify the property owners of this city alley of the city's intent to vacate the alley and seek property owners' response if they are willing to accept the property and fulfill their obligations in acquiring the property.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilor Lehman and a second by Councilor Blaine. as mentioned by Councilor Lehman, to notify the property owners and see what their feedback is. All those in favor signify by holding your hand up. Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have 5, 4, and 1 abstention. Councilor McConnell, I have to ask you the reason for abstention, please.
I just believe that we are opening a can of worms without really, I'm concerned. I don't know how to say it any other way. I don't think that we have really considered the implications.
Okay, thank you. So the motion passes 5-0 with 1 abstention. Budget Committee report.
I'm gonna go really fast, hopefully make up a little bit of time here. You guys were all on the budget committee, so you guys all were part of the interview process of Linda Krager. So she is, budget committee recommended to council, that council recommends to the mayor, that the mayor appoints Linda to another 3-year term that expires in June of 2024. So we just need a motion to make that happen.
I move to recommend that the mayor appoint Linda Krager to the Budget Committee for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor Fox to recommend that the mayor appoint Linda Krager to the Budget Committee for a 3-year term expiring 6/30/2024. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously.
Could we take?
Let me finish up. It is my honor to appoint Linda Krager to serve another term on the Budget Committee as recommended by the City Council. Congratulations, Linda. And thank you very much for your service. Councilor Bell.
Could we take down the previous slides?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Good call. Thank you.
My screen, I don't see them.
Oh, look, you're bigger.
So hard.
Intergovernmental agreement with Lane Council of Governments to Information Systems Management. Ann.
This agreement is an agreement we already hold with LCOG. They provide our IT. We have actually an IT person in-house 1 day every 2 weeks, and he provides all of our computer support. He takes care of our network, mobile web. He pretty much does what we ask him to do. He also has been very active in helping us to develop our cybersecurity programs. And so this is an agreement for 2022 to continue that service. The cost to the city annually is $15,525, and it is in our budget. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding it.
I see no questions. I'll entertain a motion. Councilor McConnell.
I move to approve the intergovernmental agreement with Lane, oops, wrong one. Sorry. I moved to, I can't find it. Go back out of this one.
It is the intergovernment agreement with Lane
That
Council
one?
of Governments for the,
Okay,
for IS services, managed IS services.
okay, I moved to approve the intergovernmental agreement for IS services. And I still don't see the rest of it.
I'm going to admit it's not in my printed package either. The cover sheet for the ordinance.
Can I
or for
say
the
yada, yada,
resolution.
yada?
There isn't a cover sheet for this.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I apologize for that.
That's okay.
It's an IGA with
IGA.
LCOG for IS managed services.
Okay, sounds good.
You,
Second.
Counselor Fox. Okay, there is a motion by Counselor McConnell and a second by Counselor Fox to approve an intergovernmental agreement with Lane Council of Governments for IS managed services for fiscal year 22 program for the amount of $15,525. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Got it? Thanks.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, counselors. And Ann, intergovernmental agreement with the Lane County Sheriff's Office for dispatch. Chief Larson.
Before you have its renewal of the dispatch contract with the Lane County Sheriff's Department. They manage the dispatch center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They dispatch 911 calls to the police department. They monitor all radio traffic and give us returns on traffic stops. They monitor warrants, all of our warrants, arrest warrants, stolen property, stolen vehicles, stolen firearms. And this is just a renewal of that contract that we entered into probably about a year and a half ago. As you can see on the financial impact, it has a 3% COLA built into the contract, which is consistent with what we had last year. And then I'll entertain any, also we have 96 hours of radio communications with their network coordinator. So he'll do radio repairs, anything like that, up to 96 hours. I think last year we probably used 30 to 40 hours of that. And that's a great benefit to have as well. And then I'll answer any questions.
Counselor Lehman? You're on. Oh, you muted.
Can you just clarify on like ADT services, when there's an alarm that goes off, who gets the call and who responds?
The sheriff's, the alarm company should have on their list, called the Lane County Sheriff's Department or the 911 Center, which will get to the Sheriff's Department, and then they dispatch to Coburg Police Department.
Thank you.
Counselor Bell?
So, Chief, are we getting the statistics from the Lane County Sheriff's Department? Is that where they come from? And are you getting the service that you need?
I am getting the service that I need. They do enter, so whenever somebody calls the police, like we just had somebody call in a hit and run, that goes through the Lane County Sheriff's Department. For them to dispatch an officer to that over the radio, they enter that into the computer system as what they call a CAD, which is a computer aided dispatch. So there's documentation on that. So if people call it into the Sheriff's Department, it's going to be documented, and it'll document our activity on if we take a report, if it wasn't a crime, all that kind of stuff would be documented from that dispatch center.
Any other questions? Counselor Lehman?
I was just going to make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the intergovernmental agreement with Lane County Sheriff's Department to provide dispatching and related services for the Coburg Police Department.
Second.
Counselor Alexander? Motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Alexander to approve the intergovernmental agreement with Lane County Sheriff's Department to provide dispatching and related services for the Coburg Police Department. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Hopefully Sammy's got it. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Administrative monthly report. Draft committee minutes are now included, and these are draft committee minutes at the end of the monthly administration report. The report also is included in all committee packets, so it's a two-way communication circle now. This will give the committees the opportunity to see what other committees are working on. Are there any questions from the administration report for Ann? I want to say that I've already received a couple of three comments actually from committee members that they are glad to see the administration report in their report and get caught up on what's going on in the city. So I think it's working, and what we intended to do was to have that circle of communication. And it's a good report for people in the city to know. It has a lot of information. Councillor Fox, are you okay? Any other questions about the administrative report? Hearing none, I want to go with council comments. I want to go back to the beginning of the meeting when Councilor Lehman brought up how we respond to these inputs from citizens, and I think we need to work on that. So I'd like to work with Ann and see how we can not get into too much of a staff capacity issue by responding to every comment, but maybe set up some kind of a policy and see how we would do that, and whether it's going to be something that council directs according to the statements, or whether it's something we just do automatically on every input. So we'll work on that, Councilor Lehman. Councilor Fox.
Yeah, it was based on the thoughtfulness of that comment that I'm always thinking about the low income adjustment and how infrequently it's used, and it's somewhat beguiling to me. I just want to make sure that that also is out there as readily as possible, because a lot of people are struggling, and it may be embarrassing for some to use it, or it may be that they're not aware. And in addition, it would also be good for the minority of people that are English as a second language that we posted in Spanish, so that type of communication is out there. So.
Okay, good comment. Anybody else with a comment? Councilor Bell. Everybody's got to make a comment. We close out tonight.
No, I don't want to.
Yes, everybody does. That's my rule.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right, Mayor, it's your rule. I just want to say thank you. I want to thank all of the staff in general, but I particularly want to do a shout out to Public Works. I walk around this town a lot, and I appreciate the tree trimming and opening up intersections so that you can see without getting out and getting hit or hitting someone. And I also want to commend Brian and his crew on the work that has been done at the parks. Those parks look awesome. And I also want to say thank you in reviewing the committee meeting minutes. A special thank you to Councilor Fox and Councilor McConnell for serving on that code review committee, because I think if I were on that committee, I would really probably have a real problem. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. That committee is pretty technical, and there's a lot of information. Unfortunately, we've got some people with good backgrounds and some history in that to help them get through that. If you read the minutes, it's pretty complex stuff, pretty intense too. Okay, who's next? Councilor Lehman.
Three things. I'd like us to return to in-person meetings, especially if we get moved to the low category. And if we do get moved to the low category, I want us to schedule the visitations to the sewer plant and look at the grounds where the potential new shop could be built. And number three, with Joe's comments about the Grange and how much they pay for the Tough, he also commented how much he's paying for the water and sewer. And I heard that this has been discussed before, it's brought up before. What exactly is the issue there? It seems like there's just a flat rate and nothing taken into consideration for actual consumption.
This was a long discussed, and Councillor Fox was part of that, a long discussed issue of who should and shouldn't pay what. It finally got to the point, Councillor Lehman, where it was just obvious everybody had to pay and we had to set a rate and go with that rate. We did have the low income assistance on the utility bill, but we even went to the point of, if you recall, the LID, the local improvement district, and deciding whether the city should pay for itself. So go back to what Joe Morneau talked about with the left hand and the right hand. Because of that, just everybody had to be fairly involved in this and pay fairly. The city paid the square footage fees on all of its properties into that also. It was very well discussed and lots of input on it. And so it was a tough discussion.
But wasn't there an appeal process? And
there's an appeal process for council actions and nobody filed one.
Okay.
That I know of.
He could have appealed his assessment on his water/sewer bill.
Oh, specifically appeals on the bill. No, I'm not sure about that one. I don't think we made an appeal process in that, did we, Councillor Fox? Because there was so much
We
discussion.
spent a lot of time on the low income thing and a discussion about, if you had a 4-bedroom house, you paid so much versus 3 bedrooms. Even if you were an only couple living in a 5-bedroom house, you would have to pay the thing because the presumption was you could have that many people in there. And so, no, it was an oversight. I'm not sure.
So even on a vacated property, they had to pay the rate regardless of the usage.
If they were getting water, they had to pay it. It's all focused on if they get a water service.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying, Ray, but it goes back to apples and oranges again and apples to apples. The Grange doesn't do showers. We don't do, meals, three times a day for all the people, so the amount of water that we use is minuscule. I mean, it's less than what most residents are, but we're still paying the top price of a business in the community of a base rate of $140. That just seems to me totally unfair.
And
just I understand I paid it. I've not argued it. I haven't fought with it, but you brought it up, so I'm going to give you my opinion. I don't think it's fair that we pay the same base that the big nonprofits in the community pay.
And believe me, the nonprofits pay a lot more. It's an EDU that is used for it. You pay one. The Serenity Lane pays a lot more.
Right, but I mean their base pay or their base is that, and then they extra use. Obviously, I understand that, but to be in charge of the simple base just seems pretty phenomenal. I mean,
well, it's like Councillor Fox said. If we tried to get down to the nitty gritties and be fair to everybody, we would spend so much staff time and processing to get those. And that really was what it came down to. There was just not a staff capacity to be able to do that. And we tried to be fair to everybody. We looked at what we needed, and just split it as evenly as we could. And yes, everybody, there's always somebody. And I agree, Joe. It's really not fair when you look at the use, but that was after months of discussion, probably years of discussion, that decision was made.
It's not just costing us, and I understand that, Ray, and I'm fine, I've been paying it, but again, the city just stepped into that plate and they took over the Oddfellows Hall, so they're paying the same base for using 0% of water basically over there. I mean, it doesn't seem right that the nonprofits who support the community, like the Oddfellows or the Grange, whatever, should have to pay that commercial rate, but again.
Well, I
Point
just,
taken.
in completing my council comments, that when the city realizes something like this, that is, I think we would all agree is not fair, that we should be able to address it rather than simply say, well, this is how it was decided 5 years ago or whatever. So I would entertain council discussion in the future that in circumstances like this, that we can make amendments.
Well, it's an amendment to a resolution, and it would be a task that the council would have to vote on to put in our task list, because it's definitely beyond a 15-minute task. So consider that. Let's look at it and be pretty specific if we can, and put it in our notes and see if we want to do that down the road.
And it would also benefit the city with the acquisition of the Oddfellows building.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Fox, you got a statement?
Yeah, that would just, to me, be something for a retreat, because that's an in-depth discussion of amending something.
Yes, I agree. Councilor McConnell.
Yes, sir. I would like to commend Main Street, because we have beautiful flower baskets throughout the city, and they're gorgeous. And I believe that Brian sometimes has to get his crew to water them, so that's extra time for Brian. So I really appreciate Brian. And I would like to just commend the city as a whole for this. This is really a lovely little community, and we have a lot going for us here. And I'm really proud to be able to tell people I live in Coburg.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Alexander.
Yeah, I'd like to bring notice to how our crime rate has gone down over the last few months. We had a pretty rough 3 months ago, and it was rough the month after that. But then I read these, and I will say that it has gone down. I do know that our police department's done a lot of investigating, and I want to commend them for that. I think they've done a great job on that, and I think that they really have a finger on what this community needs. I also want to commend them for standing strong and standing straight up during such a crazy time when we're questioning our police departments. So I do want to commend them for staying strong and true to our city, and for the crime rate going down.
Bravo, I agree. And I also want to recognize the fact that we have an awful lot of cops that spent a lot of nighttime hours in the last couple of months to work on getting that crime down. So my kudos to the chief and all the officers that were out there in the wee hours of the morning to try and deal with this. So thank you. Councilor Blaine.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon here. I appreciate, the staff. I mean, I know you guys are working your butts off with all of the changes that are constantly happening here in our city and state and local governments. And, all of our city council members, I appreciate all your guys' opinions and the fact that you're all diving in. And I hope that, we are doing the best for the future of our city. And I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where we keep going, because I feel like we just keep setting the bar a little higher here in Coburg. And I hope we just keep achieving and achieving. And I appreciate, everybody that's a part of this. It's really cool. And Mayor, you've been phenomenal. Like, truly, like, it's great to have you. You're wonderful at moving the conversation. You can speak up when you need to, and you can sit back and listen when you need to. And you've done a very good job. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Counselor. I want to say that one of the things that has been most rewarding in the last couple of months is the committee communication. And I feel like the committee members are newly motivated, not that any of them were less motivated, but I feel like they're a little more involved in it. And I think it's because of the communication that we're trying to get between the council and the committee and the council and staff, and just have this circle of communication. And it's really neat to see some people that want to get involved in these committees with huge amounts of experience and knowledge in so many ways that really make the volunteers a critical part of our decision making and planning in this community. And that's really what Coburg is. It's just done it's done its hard work with volunteers and the people like us that give their time freely to do some hard work and ask some tough questions. So it's been fun to watch the revitalization of the committee. So my kudos to them, and I really appreciate everybody's work that has made a big difference in this community. The staff shows it with excellent work, and we're making good decisions. And when I talk with other cities and governments, they're amazed at what this city does with the resources that we have for being such a small town. So with that, did I miss any?
Are you going to be in person next time?
We're still working on that. One of the issues that we have is these Zoom meetings actually bring viewers in. And so we want to be able to continue that. And even if we're meeting in person, to be able to broadcast out. So the audio visual part in the city council chamber is one of the elements we're trying to deal with. And there is some COVID concerns, so we have to address those too and look at what we're doing. The joint session that we're having on the 27th really does create some challenges because the room is for 24 people, I think. And when you get the planning commission, the staff, and the city councilors in, that doesn't leave much room for anything else. So we are working on it. I want to be in person, I think as much as most of you do, but we do have to be concerned about regulations and the concerns of other people that would be in the building. So we're working on it. We're trying to get there. I will say July 27th, probably not. August on, let's hope. Okay, last chance for any counselors. We're adjourned at 9:42. Thank you, everybody. That was a really big agenda. Good night.